In this video, I'm going to be responding to one of the questions I had on my YouTube channel, and it was actually pretty long. If you're on my YouTube channel and seeing this, it's probably on the screen. But it was actually pretty long, and they're all great questions. So the good news is I think with a few analogies, I can kind of answer all of those questions, if you can grasp this place that I'm coming from.
There is no spoon?
So you asked, is the brain and awareness separate in a sense? Like, is the brain like a radio that's receiving consciousness? And then I believe you said you had some friends that asked or implied that the brain and consciousness aren't two, because you could have instances where somebody's like 50 years old, but they were born with a mental disability, so they have the mind of a child, right? And then to branch off of that, I don't really remember the rest of what you asked, but this should answer the rest of it. To branch off of that, I've used the same kind of analogy in a sense that you can hit your head and go from being a totally faithful, honest person and knowing who you are to a liar and a cheater and aggressive and having no memory whatsoever of who you are or what you've ever done.
Untouched.
Hence, there is no self specifically anywhere in here looking out, right? So to kind of answer all of these questions, you have to recognize how the brain itself is awareness, is consciousness, right? Everything is consciousness, awareness. Just like how in a dream, everything is the same one awareness, right? From, say this is my dream right now, and I'm the dream character. Say I wasn't aware of anything all the rest of my videos have talked about. I would assume that all I can see in this room right now is matter, right? Or energy. But really everything in that dream is awareness. And the matter, everything you see in the dream is the activity of that awareness, right? So mind is matter. Matter is mind. And mind is just the activity of awareness, right? So first of all, understand that mind and awareness aren't separate in that way at all. Okay? And just like how in a dream, the dream character, awareness from the second person perspective of itself, it conceptualizes everything itself, awareness as energy, matter, right? So right now, you're doing that same thing. When you look out at the table or the chairs or the rest of this room, you conceptualize it and you say it's energy, but really that's awareness, the vibration of awareness. Just like how in a dream, the table in the dream is just a vibration of awareness. There's nothing solid about that, right? But in your dream, you can touch the table and you can feel it. That's exactly what's happening right now, only it's confusing, and you deeply start to assume that there's something in here looking out because of things like this. Like when you blink and it goes black, you assume, well, I must be in here looking out. But recognize how in a dream, when the dream character blinks, you would see black, right? Even though that dream character is the entire dream, the entire awareness, right?
Spiritual tools.
So of course, if you are awareness, the whole, whenever this localization of itself blinks, it's going to experience black. It's just if you're a mind about it, you're going to conceptualize it as I am in here looking out because I saw black when I blinked. Just like how mind conceptualizes, first of all, everything is away from itself, but even something like sound, and this can get kind of trippy. A train passes by and you assume that you're hearing the sound come from over there, from the train over there, right? But recognize how, okay, first of all, let's back it up. Where do you hear your thoughts at, right? Just here. I don't want to say here like in your head. But when I say here, I just mean here as an awareness, right? Like how for the dream character, here is everywhere because they are awareness and awareness is the whole, right? So you hear your thoughts here, right? That's where you hear that sound of your thoughts. And then if you were to take a headset and listen to music, you hear that music, that sound here, right? It's not out there, and you would think, well, yeah, because it's on your head, but just And then when you hear that train pass or somebody shut their door and you think it's over there, where do you hear that sound? Just here, right? It's not over there. Someone can be beating a drum, can be beating the shit out of a drum over there, but you always hear it here. It's just conceptualization to think that first something is over there, but just like how in a dream awareness is everything, the whole, right? It's also conceptualization to think that sound came from over there and was heard from over there in that way. Just like how if you're looking down a set of train tracks, right? Mind conceptualizes them as getting smaller, right? Because it's also conceptualizing it as away from it. So it does this mind trick where it says, okay, that is away from me and getting smaller, right? But it's really not. You can get on the train tracks, look down, and continue to walk forward and recognize for yourself, which just is obvious, but I gotta break it down. You can recognize how the train tracks don't get smaller. That's just a conceptualization, a mind trick, that they're actually getting smaller as they get away from you, right? So your mind does that same thing with sound. That's what's happening. That's what you're doing. You're deeply conceptualizing that I am here, so that is over there, and the sound is coming from over there, so that I'm also kind of hearing it from over there. No, it's all here. It's like how the dream character is the awareness that is the entire dream, and everything that happens within that dream is all happening here. Anytime you say I am here, the table is there, that's a conceptualization of mind. There comes a point, I guess I should say this, there comes a point when there's neither self or no self, right? So we'll talk a lot about no self, but there comes a point where there's just neither self or no self. That's where this gets trippy. Like how I could be explaining this as all one thing, like a dream, and how that's over there, but it's not. And it's like, what? Like I don't get it. How is the dream character got this self, but also there's not a self? It's because it doesn't. Reality itself doesn't fit into a conceptual frame. So anytime you're thinking about this, you're conceptualizing it. You have to know this like how you would know something like love, right? You can't think about what love is to know love, right? That would only make you crave love more. The more you think about what love could be, you're just going to want it more, right? That's not how you experience love, is my point. The only way you know love is to be love, right? So the only way to know and to have this recognition, to know existence, is to be existential. I can't ever say that word, right? You just have to be. Just no mind and just be seen, right? A seeing. And by that I mean just awareness, right? No attention outward. I think you also mentioned, kind of skipping around, but I think you also mentioned how it seemed hard to disidentify with being the thinker, right? Or something to that effect, right? It was easy to disidentify with everything else, but it was hard to let go of being the thinker. You have to recognize how a thought isn't separate from awareness either. Nothing is separate from awareness at all. A thought is just the activity of awareness, like how Francis Lucille and Rupert Spira give this analogy of the TV screen, but like how the images on the TV screen aren't necessarily separate from the TV screen, right? They're arising within the TV screen. The TV screen being awareness, right? So a thought is much like the images arising on a screen. It's not separate from the screen. It's just the activity of that screen. So a thought and awareness, a thought is awareness, right? But a thought itself, like I said in my other videos, doesn't know a thing, right? The thought dog doesn't know of the thought cat, or the thought dog doesn't know of this conversation right now, right? It's awareness that knows. Awareness is responsible for seeing, for knowing, hearing. It's responsible for literally everything, right? So to prove this, it's like if I were to ask you the question, what's your favorite band, Tool or Three Doors Down? And I've said this in some of my other videos, and of course the answer is Tool, but for example's sake, let's say I ask you Tool or Three Doors Down. Before you have the thought Tool, there's a pause, right? And in that pause, that knowing occurs, right? So I ask you Tool or Three Doors Down, There's this pause, this knowing tool, of course, and then the thought tool, right? And then the next thought, which causes this illusion of you thinking that there's a thinker, says, I chose tool. You think to yourself, I chose tool. So in reality, in that pause, awareness is what made that choice. And awareness being the whole, that point where there's neither self or no self, that's how there comes that point where there's not a chooser in it, right? Because you, in fact, nothing, in fact, chose tool. It's just in that pause, in awareness, that knowing occurs, and then the thought tool. And then there comes this identification with the thought or being the thinker, right? So in awareness, in that knowing, it's not a choice, it's knowing, right? And it's just important to recognize how a thought doesn't know a thing in that way, and how it's always awareness prior to, not even prior to it, awareness is always there, right? It's just from that awareness, from that knowing, arises the thought tool, and mind conceptualizes that phenomenon as two different things. Like most people don't even recognize that knowing occurs first in awareness, right? Because mind goes straight to dividing, straight to conceptualization. So a thought doesn't know a thing, and a thought arises from within awareness, just like how the dream character's thinking arises from that awareness, which is the whole. God, I could have said that in the beginning. So, and I think it's also important to recognize how most people, when they go down this route, if it's in meditation, to have these recognitions, it can go a couple ways. You'll either identify with being awareness first, right? So you'll say, I am awareness and none of that, everything you can see, right? And then usually after that, there's another recognition, this outward recognition, how, oh, all I can see is also me, right? So for me, it happened the opposite way. I was practicing it with my eyes open and just being a witness. So I had the recognition of how all I could see was equally me, just the same one thing. So I identified with everything that way first, right? And to go inward is to not go inside your body, but just to go into awareness. So when you close your eyes, it shuts off perception. It's easier to identify with just being awareness, right? And then in that, you can recognize how awareness is where everything is arising from. So you'll go from I am not that to I am this, and then to I am everything again. If that makes sense.
There is no spoon.
Also, recognize how the brain isn't responsible for that which makes awareness, just like how the occipital lobes aren't responsible for that which seeing is made of. Right? You could have your eyeballs damaged to where awareness cannot rise in this physical state in the form of seeing any longer. Right? You could damage your eyes and it's not clear, it's blurry. So now awareness is arising in this form of awareness, this vibration of awareness, in an unclear manner. Yet, whenever you dream at night, that same individual will see their dreams clearly. Why is that? Because the stuff in which seeing is made of is awareness. It doesn't arise from the occipital lobes in that way. Awareness itself is responsible for seeing. That's why in the dreams it's clear. But in that physical state where the occipital lobe is required, this frequency of awareness vibrating at a specific frequency is required for awareness to arise. It can no longer arise in that form of seeing clearly, if at all. So the mind tricks itself and it says the eyeball is responsible for seeing because since it is damaged and it is separate from awareness and I can't see, that must be why. But no, the eyeball itself is awareness, mind, matter at a different frequency, and awareness can no longer arise in that frequency in that way to see clearly. But seeing itself arises in awareness, just like everything else, just like in a dream. Just like if the dream character's eye was to be damaged. God, I could have said that in the beginning too.